Hey, great to be with you this morning. So happy to be back on the air here on WOWO with all of you listening all around the country and, of course, everyone here in our area. It is a beautiful Saturday morning, and a lot of us have very busy weekends to tack on to the end of a very busy week. We all live with just a tremendous amount of stress these days. And, of course, what's happening with COVID and employment and all those things just add on. And all that stress that we cope with day in and day out can really take a toll on our body. And that's where we begin today. We're going to take a look at how constant exposure to stress affects us, and then what you can do, some drug-free solutions to help your body adapt to all that stress. So let me welcome to the program our good friend Gregg Russell from Fort Wayne Custom RX, pharmacist and clinical nutritionist. Good morning, Gregg.
Good morning. Great to be here. Well, not here, but great to be here.
Yeah, that's right. So just for you folks at home, Gregg and I are in our homes respectively. There was the risk that I had been exposed to COVID this week, and so we're doing this from the safety of our own little chambers here. And happy to tell you that I tested negative, but we're still going remote just so we don't take a chance. So Gregg, let's start with this understanding of stress, and it all has to do with something called your hypothalamus, which is kind of like your body's thermostat. It's this little organ about the size of a pea that is in your brain. And
Yes.
help me understand what makes it so important and how your body manages stress.
Sure. So, it's one of the basic, most primitive organs that's been around forever. It's in all mammals, and it's basically a life-saving system that helps us handle stress. So here we are, we're under the COVID stress. CDC says 5,500, they did a survey, got a response back, 5,500 people, 25% have depression, 25% have anxiety, 15% have increased their drug use of the respondents that came back and responded. And even more alarming, 10% of people are depressed enough to consider suicide within about a 2-week period. So we are under a tremendous amount of stress, and we have to learn to manage that stress, because stress is good for us. If the train's coming and we need to get across the train tracks, we got to have a little stress. But chronic stress is very unhealthy for us.
So what is it doing in our bodies? What is that chronic stress causing to happen?
Sure. And a lot of it comes down to a cortisol and adrenaline. We've talked about these type of stimulants in the past. So, what's interesting is cortisol, responds to lots of different types of stresses. Certainly we have the psychological stress that occurs. We also have our body puts us under stress, or physiological stress. Inflammation, and then the lack of sleep is another stressor. And we'll talk about all of those in more detail. But basically what happens is cortisol's role is to heal the body and protect us under certain forms of stress. But chronically, what will happen is stress, or your cortisol levels will get what we call dysregulated. And when it becomes dysregulated, it's not working like it's supposed to.
And that can result in, well, you said, insomnia is one of the challenges, headaches, heart disease, memory problems and brain fog. You can have trouble with digestion. I mean, the list of symptoms gets really long.
It goes on and on and on and on, because it's such an important hormone. So basically what happens is cortisol is a hormone that is secreted basically when the sun comes out. So it's made to be highest in the morning, and then it will start dipping through the day. And by the time you go to bed, it's really low. And that's what we call a diurnal pattern. So that's great for us people that get up with the sun and go to bed with the moon, or at nighttime when there's less sun. And if we can stay in that kind of a pattern, that's very healing for our body. Okay, because we want cortisol to be elevated to a certain point, because if cortisol has an effect on our immune system, which, as we're very keenly aware of what's going on with the immune system with COVID right now. So we want our immune system to be nice and healthy. But over periods of time, if the cortisol remains elevated over a period of time, the brain has a set point, and it starts to say, hey, elevated cortisol is not so good. And at a certain point, the brain starts to not communicate like it should. And I always tell people it's kind of like a bad internet connection. The brain, at some point, if you're overstimulated, the internet connection becomes bad, and now the brain is not controlling the adrenal glands' production of cortisol.
Gotcha. And the adrenal glands are these little glands that sit on top of your kidneys, and if they get burned out, then you have a number of different challenges you have to face. Right. So one of the things that you can do for stress is something that I know I've done, and I think that's kind of one of the key factors in the whole meditation process, and that is breathing technique. Now, you are a supporter of something called box breathing. Can you explain that for us?
I sure can. Box breathing is a very simple exercise to do, and it works on the principle of when you breathe in or breathe out, you're breathing out and you're stimulating the parasympathetic system. So the parasympathetic system is the braking system of your body that kind of helps you relax. And when you breathe in, you're breathing in, you're stimulating the sympathetic or the acceleration system of your body. The reality is most of us don't do enough breathing out. We do a lot of breathing in. We get excited when we breathe in. And when we're constantly stimulated, that sympathetic overdrive occurs. You get this imbalance of too much sympathetic. So a box breathing is just a simple thing to do. And they call it box breathing because you're basically going in a pattern like a square. But basically you breathe out for 4 seconds. You hold for 4 seconds, breathe in for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, breathe out again, and so forth. It goes on and on. So you're basically trying to reset your parasympathetic system. So that's the simplest way. There's all kinds of different ways to do it. There's the whole concept of coherence, which then we can start using some technology pieces like a heart math monitor, which for your viewers, I can show you what that kind of looks like. And again, that teaches you how to breathe properly, and it connects into an iPhone device. And that's something you can buy online through the Apple Store.
So that's an active way to try and manage your physical reaction to stress and get your body back into sync. Right. But beyond that, there are things that are out there in the natural world, in the herbal world, that have been used for thousands of years. And that's where we're going to go next. We're going to talk about a class of products called adaptogens. Some of them have funny names, but they have a big impact. And we're going to get into all of that with our clinical nutritionist and pharmacist, Gregg Russell from Fort Wayne Custom RX when we come back here on the HealthCall Live Radio Hour on WOWO. Hey, great to be back with you. I am with Gregg Russell, clinical nutritionist and pharmacist at Fort Wayne Custom RX. We are talking about a class of supplements called adaptogens because they help your body adapt to stress. So, Gregg, let's walk through some of these products that you recommend for people. Which ones? Where do you want to start? How about ashwagandha?
Ashwagandha. So let's start with the products that are the oldest, have been around a long time. So ashwagandha has been one of those products that's been used in the Ayurvedic community for ages. It is called horse ginseng, is the common name for it in the Indian community, and it's been known as a good stimulant tonic to help with when patients are under stress. And so the nice thing about ashwagandha is it's one of the easiest ones to use. It's interesting to me that ashwagandha all of a sudden is starting to really have an upsurge. They're starting to see some practitioners are starting to recommend it for being used for COVID. So I think it's really interesting because it also has some immune enhancing properties to it.
So what does it do in our bodies? What is ashwagandha helping? Will I feel any impact from it?
Yeah. Again, when we treat people that have a lot of issues, we're going to do things kind of holistically. So ashwagandha probably is one of those herbs that's going to take 2 to 3 months typically for it to really start working. We find that the average person's using it 3 to 6 months. And it's one of those things that, you wake up a couple months later and say, boy, I am feeling better. I didn't really realize how bad I didn't feel. Or how good I didn't feel. And so it's not one of those drugs that's going to, or one of those herbs that's going to have an overnight feel, but it does gradually over time, it helps restore that cortisol balance that we talked about.
So is it a tea, a tincture? Is it capsules? How is it taken?
It comes different ways, but most people are going to want the capsules. It's not a very pleasant tasting product by itself, so the capsules are going to be good. So typically when we start using these type of herbs, we like them in combinations. And so the ones that are probably the most common are going to be ashwagandha is very common. Rhodiola is another one. So have you heard of rhodiola?
Yeah, I think we talked about it before, but quite frankly, I don't recall what's its benefit. Isn't that an immune booster?
It is an immune booster. It's been extensively studied in the Soviet Union or Russia. It as used as a kind of an exercise recovery product is what I like to say. So for people who feel fatigued or they feel their mental sharpness is dulled, using something like ashwagandha can help restore that. And so it's one of the most researched herbs out there. So rhodiola, ashwagandha are a couple of herbs that are also stimulatory. And then we get into some other ones that sound funny, Schisandra and Eleutherococcus. And those herbs also are kind of in the same type of category. They're stimulating herbs. And these things these herbs work on what they call heat shock proteins. And heat shock proteins are the chaperones that open up the receptors to cortisol. And so there is a lot of complicated science in this, so it's really hard to overly explain. But the reality is they modulate. If you need it during a stressful scenario, it's going to help that receptor work better. And remember, our receptor theory, we talked about it with lots of different insulins and things of that nature, is the key being cortisol has to fit into the receptor on the cell, which is the lock. So again, we're trying to work on those locks, make those locks work. So we find that Schisandra, rhodiola, these are the kind of the more standard herbs. These 3 or 4 herbs are the ones that are found in most formulations, and they're used in combination. Now, for some special scenarios, I love, for that person that's really jacked up and they having trouble sleeping, I love to use theanine. And we've talked about theanine before too, I believe, haven't we, Lee?
I think we have, yeah. So sometimes it's marketed as L-theanine, right?
Right. And the L just stands for left-handed. So theanine exerts both right and left-handed. So they standardize it to the L, or the left-handed theanine. But basically, theanine is a product that's in tea. Okay, along with DGCG, which is an antioxidant that's found in green tea. So L-theanine is in that. What we do is L-theanine is actually an amino acid, but what it does is it down regulates the glutamate receptor, and it helps improve GABA. And GABA is a chemical neurotransmitter that actually calms the brain down. So for patients that have a difficulty sleeping and the cortisols are jacked up high through the day, I love to give L-theanine through the day. Now, we talked about how fast the drug works. L-theanine and rhodiola work pretty quick. So those will be the ones that we kind of go to quickly if we need something to work really fast, whereas some of the other adaptogens take a little more time to work. But L-theanine is very safe, very few side effects. We've used it in children. It's kind of my go-to. I call it the herbal Xanax without the addiction.
Okay.
Calms down, doesn't make you drowsy.
Wow. Okay, I like the sound of that.
Mm-hmm.
So, how do I grow accustomed to these herbs over time? Do I have to keep modulating the dose? And tell me more about how all that works.
Yeah. So there's different formulations, and they're mixed together, and they may be used for a certain pattern of cortisol stress. Somebody who's really low energy in the morning may need a different blend than somebody who's really jacked up in the morning. So what we try to do is we try to assess what your pattern is, what's going on with your symptomology. And we can do a cortisol test if somebody really wants to spend the money to look at the cortisols. And we do that quite frequently. But basically, we try to figure out what formulation is best for you. And then we have to reassess, because oftentimes we'll have to change formulations over time. But the goal is to get your stress response system back into rhythm and get you off these products. These are not intended to be lifetime products.
So what symptoms are going to drive me to these products? What do I need to be suffering that makes me want to come and talk to you about this?
Sure. Well, I think a lot of things. One would be very low energy. Another would be sleep issues. anxiety, low libido, poor blood sugar control. I mean, who would think poor blood sugar control? But cortisol, when it dysregulates, it affects insulin, and insulin also, insulin dysregulation also causes increased blood sugars. So maybe you're one of those people who gets very, you do a lot of what we call nighttime eating, binge eating. Okay, that is a problem with cortisol. So that's just one symptom. So there's a whole list of different symptoms, but probably the biggest ones were going to be fatigue and lack of sleep, low anxiety, sometimes depression. We see depression can be linked to this too. And so because the neurotransmitters get affected by cortisol too, our brain chemicals.
This is also complex. I appreciate having access to your expertise, because if I'm just going out to the supermarket and, hey, somebody said I should try ashwagandha, I don't know what I'm getting and what is the right dose and all that kind of stuff. So do I need to have a consultation with you, or can I just come in and kind of have an over-the-counter conversation?
You can come in and have an over-the-counter. If you want something more in depth, we can certainly sit down and do an hour-long consultation, which we quite often do, which is different than just walking in and asking for a little bit of help. But we offer both at our pharmacy. Again, our goal is to help educate and help you learn. Our goal is not to just put you on a product and have to keep coming and buying it and buying and buying it. Our goal is to kind of improve your health so you can get off those products. And then the direct benefit is you can have better weight control, better blood sugar control, better control of your blood pressure, and you're just going to feel overall better.
Well, people are always concerned about cost, Greg. What would this regimen cost me on a monthly basis approximately?
Yeah, probably anywhere from $50 to $60, probably in that range, depending. And that's high. We can go lower, depending on what your needs are. And of course, that's going to be depending on somebody who's got a lot of severe symptoms, might need a little bit more work than somebody who's just having a little trouble sleeping at night. So
just pull back a little bit on the Starbucks through the month, and I got that covered, and I'm going to feel better and be healthier. That sounds like a pretty good bargain all the way around.
Yeah.
And is there anything different about the herbs that I get at your place versus online or in a supermarket?
Yeah, one of the things that really frustrates me, I see a lot of people get into this whole, what we call the adrenal supplement market, and they are using subpotent herbs, or they don't tell you what the extract is or what the strength is. They're proprietary blends. Nothing drives me nuttier than a proprietary blend when I don't know what's in it. The studies that are out there have definite standardized doses with definite doses that are recommended. And if the supplement doesn't have the amount of adaptogen that needs to be in there and the purity of it, then the product's simply not going to work. Or even worse, can make you even sicker.
Yeah. Are there any medications that would keep me from using these products?
They're typically very few and in between. For example, we probably wouldn't, there's a product that can increase your blood pressure. So if somebody has uncontrolled blood pressure, we would certainly make sure the product didn't have, for example, licorice in it. Licorice is something that can cause, that prevents cortisol from becoming cortisone. By doing that, it can increase your blood pressure. It affects aldosterone retention, which can increase blood volume, which then increases your blood pressure. So we want to be very careful. So you're right, not every product is for every person.
Which makes it all the more important that you have a meeting with either Greg or Paula or some of the staff at Fort Wayne Custom RX. They're at 425 East DuPont Road. You find them online at fortwaynecustomrx.com. Greg, good to talk to you from your house and my house here on the radio. That's kind of a wild thing that we're doing here
today, didn't we? Yep.
Yeah, well, I guess it worked out just great. Yeah. So happy to have you here. And one last thing, you have a seminar coming up on this, right? Tell folks about that.
I do have a seminar coming up on, wrote my date down. It'll be in November 19th at 7 p.m. So again, you can send an email to Kylie, Kylee at fwcustomrx.com, and you can sign right up, and you can do this from your home too. We'll Zoom right with you, and we'll go into this in much more detail, and I'll simplify it out a little bit more for you. It lasts about an hour.
All right, there you go. That's Gregg Russell from Fort Wayne Custom RX. Thank you for being here. I know we'll see you again next month on the program, so appreciate you being here.
Look forward to it. Thank you.